At her party, my mom said loudly, "I owe you nothing, you're worthless," sipped my drink and smiled. "That's fine. I just wanted to announce I'm moving abroad permanently." Suddenly, she wasn't laughing. I've been a long-time lurker on this sub, but recent events have finally given me a story worth sharing. This happened 3 weeks ago, and I'm still processing everything that went down. Fair warning, this is going to be long, but I promise it's worth the read. To understand why this moment was so satisfying, I need to give you some background on my relationship with my mother, Patricia. She's one of those people who thrives on control and public perception. Everything has to be perfect on the surface, even if it's rotten underneath. Growing up, I was her favorite target for criticism, especially in front of others. My name is Jessica, and I'm 30 years old. I work as a software engineer for a tech startup in Austin, Texas. I've been financially independent since I graduated college 8 years ago, but that's never stopped my mom from treating me like a disappointment. According to Patricia, nothing I've ever done has been good enough. My job isn't prestigious enough, my apartment isn't in the right neighborhood, and I'm still single at 30, which she considers a personal failure. The favoritism in our family has always been obvious. My younger brother Marcus is the golden child. He's 28, works in finance, drives a BMW, and recently got engaged to his college girlfriend Sarah. Patricia never misses an opportunity to compare us, usually with me coming out on the losing end. Marcus has learned to stay quiet during these comparisons, which I used to resent, but I've come to understand that he's just trying to survive our mother's manipulation like the rest of us. My father, Robert, passed away 4 years ago from a heart attack. He was the buffer between Patricia and the rest of the family. After his death, her behavior became even more erratic and controlling. She seemed to blame me for everything that went wrong in her life, from the weather to her own poor financial decisions. Speaking of financial decisions, this brings me to the crux of our relationship issues. 2 years ago, Patricia came to me with what she called a temporary request. She had made some bad investments, and was struggling with bills even before Dad died. After his death, her financial situation became even more precarious. Being the naive daughter who still hoped for her mother's approval, I agreed to help. What started as a few $100s here and there quickly escalated to me essentially supporting her lifestyle. I was paying her mortgage, her car payment, her credit card minimums, and even her grocery bills. All told, I was giving her about $3,000 a month. For someone making a decent living in tech, that was still a significant portion of my income. It meant I couldn't save for my own house, couldn't take vacations, and had to live in a smaller apartment than I could otherwise afford. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, but temporary stretched into months, then a year, then 2 years. Every time I brought up scaling back the support, Patricia would guilt me with stories about how hard her life was, how Robert's death had left her in a difficult position, and how family was supposed to take care of each other. She never once acknowledged the sacrifice I was making or showed any genuine gratitude. Meanwhile, Marcus contributed exactly nothing to our mother's support. He was saving for his wedding, he explained, and besides, he claimed he couldn't afford it on his entry-level finance salary. This wasn't entirely unreasonable since he had only been working for 3 years, but Patricia never pressured him the way she pressured me. In her mind, supporting her was my responsibility because I was the daughter, and daughters were supposed to take care of their mothers. The breaking point came about 6 months ago. I had been working on a particularly challenging project at work, pulling 70-hour weeks for 2 months straight. I was exhausted, stressed, and honestly questioning whether I was in the right career. I called Patricia, hoping for some motherly support and encouragement. Instead, she spent 20 minutes complaining about how I wasn't giving her enough money to maintain her lifestyle properly. She wanted to redecorate her living room and couldn't afford the furniture she wanted. She suggested I could pick up some overtime or maybe ask for a raise so I could increase her monthly allowance. When I explained that I was already working as much as humanly possible and barely had time to sleep, she sighed dramatically and said I needed to get my priorities straight. That conversation was a wake-up call. I realized that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. Patricia didn't see me as a daughter making sacrifices for her family, she saw me as a convenient ATM with no feelings or needs of my own. I started making plans. First, I began looking for opportunities to work abroad. My company had offices in London, Amsterdam, and Singapore, and they had a program for transferring employees internationally. I had always been interested in working overseas, but I had never seriously considered it because I felt obligated to stay close to family. Now, leaving the country seemed like the perfect solution to my Patricia problem. The research phase was extensive. I spent countless evenings after work diving deep into what an international transfer would actually entail. The Amsterdam office particularly caught my attention because they were expanding their software development team and actively looking for experienced engineers with my specific skill set. The Netherlands had excellent worker protections, a high quality of life, and most importantly for me, it was far enough away that Patricia couldn't just show up at my door when she needed money. I started taking Dutch language lessons online through an app, spending my lunch breaks conjugating verbs and learning basic phrases. The language was challenging, but I found myself genuinely excited about the prospect of becoming fluent in something completely new. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself that Patricia had never touched. The visa requirements were complex but manageable. As a skilled worker with a job offer from a Dutch company, I would qualify for a highly skilled migrant visa. My employer would sponsor the application, and the whole process typically took about 3 months from submission to approval. I meticulously gathered all the required documents, my college transcripts, employment records, bank statements, and a clean criminal background check. I spent months preparing my application for the International Transfer Program. I took online courses in cloud architecture and machine learning to strengthen my resume, networked with colleagues in the overseas offices through video calls and professional forums, and researched visa requirements until I could recite them from memory. I even started following Dutch news sources and tech blogs to better understand the professional landscape I might be entering. The networking aspect was particularly interesting. I connected with several engineers in the Amsterdam office through LinkedIn and our company's internal messaging system. They painted a picture of a collaborative, innovative work environment with excellent work-life balance. One colleague, Pieter, told me about the company's generous relocation package and how they had helped him transition from Germany 2 years earlier. Another, Maria, described the vibrant tech scene in Amsterdam and how welcoming the international community was to newcomers. These conversations reinforced my conviction that this move was exactly what I needed. Not only would it advance my career, but it would give me the fresh start I craved. I could build relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. I could explore who I really was when I wasn't constantly managing Patricia's emotions and demands. I was careful not to mention any of this to my family. If Patricia got wind of my plans, she would do everything in her power to sabotage them. I knew her tactics well enough to predict exactly what she would do. She would call my boss and fabricate some story about a family emergency requiring me to stay local. She would contact my company's HR department claiming I was having mental health issues. She would recruit relatives to pressure me about abandoning my family responsibilities. To maintain the secrecy, I used my personal laptop for all application-related activities and set up a separate email account for communications with the Amsterdam office. I scheduled my language lessons during my lunch breaks and told colleagues I was taking professional development courses. When packages arrived with visa application materials, I had them delivered to my office instead of my apartment. The psychological aspect of planning my escape was almost as complex as the logistical elements. I found myself going through stages similar to grief. There was denial where I convinced myself that maybe Patricia would change if I just found the right way to communicate with her. There was anger when I calculated exactly how much money I had given her and what I could have accomplished with those funds instead. There was bargaining where I considered staying if she would just acknowledge my sacrifice and commit to becoming more independent. But ultimately, there was acceptance. I accepted that Patricia was never going to change because her current arrangement worked perfectly for her. She got to maintain her lifestyle without any real effort or sacrifice on her part. She got to play the victim whenever I showed any resistance. She got to be the center of attention at family gatherings while positioning me as the problem child who didn't appreciate everything she had done for me. During this planning phase, I also started documenting everything. I kept spreadsheets of every payment I had made to Patricia, screenshots of her demanding text messages, and records of the promises she had broken about paying me back or reducing her expenses. Part of me hoped I would never need this documentation, but I suspected it might become relevant if she tried to paint me as the villain in our family drama. The transfer approval came through 6 months ago. I was accepted for a position in the Amsterdam office, with a start date of January 15th. The salary was actually higher than what I was making in Austin, and the company was covering all my relocation expenses. I was thrilled, but I kept the news to myself while I figured out how to handle the Patricia situation. The visa process took about 2 months to complete, which gave me time to plan my exit strategy carefully. Around this time, Patricia announced that she was throwing herself a birthday party. She was turning 55 and wanted to celebrate with a big bash at the local country club. She invited about 50 people, including all her relatives, her friends from work, neighbors, and even some of my father's old colleagues. She made a big deal about how this party would show everyone how well she was doing after Robert's death. The planning for this party became an obsession for Patricia. She spent weeks agonizing over the guest list, the menu, the decorations, and her outfit. She called me almost daily with updates and requests for opinions on details I couldn't have cared less about. Did I think the salmon or the chicken would be better for the main course? Should she go with white roses or pink ones for the centerpieces? Would people expect a live band or would a DJ be sufficient? These conversations were torture because I knew exactly how she was funding this elaborate celebration. Every discussion about upgrading the flower arrangements or adding an extra appetizer to the menu was a reminder of my own financial sacrifice. While she was debating between premium and top-shelf liquor for the open bar, I was eating ramen noodles for dinner and postponing a desperately needed oil change for my car. What made it worse was Patricia's complete lack of awareness about the contradiction. In the same phone call, She would complain about being financially stressed and ask me to increase my monthly contribution, then immediately launch into excited planning about some expensive party detail. When I gently suggested that maybe a smaller, more intimate gathering would be more appropriate given her financial situation, she acted as though I had suggested canceling Christmas. The guest list was particularly revealing of Patricia's priorities. She invited people she barely spoke to anymore, distant relatives who lived across the country, and even some of my father's former colleagues who she had lost touch with years ago. It became clear that this party wasn't really about celebrating her birthday. It was about creating an audience for her performance as the successful, well-adjusted widow who had everything under control. She specifically made sure to invite all the relatives who she regularly complained to about my supposed selfishness. Aunt Linda, cousin Rebecca, my father's brother Tom and his wife Susan, even my maternal grandmother who was 83 years old and rarely left her assisted living facility anymore. Patricia wanted all these people there to witness whatever she was planning. I started to suspect that this party was going to be the venue for some kind of public confrontation. Patricia had been dropping hints for weeks about how she was tired of being taken advantage of and how it was time for certain people to step up and take responsibility. She made cryptic comments about how the party would be a turning point and how some people might be surprised by what they learned. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was funding this party with money I had given her for necessities. The venue rental alone cost more than my monthly rent. The catering, flowers, decorations, and entertainment probably totaled close to $5,000. Meanwhile, she was telling relatives that I wasn't giving her enough money to cover her basic living expenses. But I saw an opportunity in her planning. Patricia loved having an audience, and she especially loved having an audience when she was putting me in my place. I decided that her birthday party would be the perfect venue for my announcement. If she wanted to make our family drama public, then I would give her exactly what she was asking for. I started reducing Patricia's monthly allowance 6 weeks before the party. Instead of my usual $3,000, I gave her $2,500, then $2,000, then $1,500. Each time, I had a different excuse. Work was slow, I had unexpected expenses, my car needed repairs. Patricia complained bitterly, but she had no choice but to accept the reduced amounts. The complaints intensified as the party approached. Patricia called me multiple times per week, sometimes in tears, begging me to understand how difficult her situation was. She painted dramatic pictures of potentially losing her house, having to cancel the party, being unable to maintain her dignity in front of friends and family. Each conversation was designed to manipulate me into feeling guilty and opening my wallet wider. During one particularly memorable call, Patricia sobbed into the phone about how she was having to choose between groceries and her prescription medications. When I offered to take her grocery shopping and buy her food directly, she became hostile and accused me of trying to control her. What she wanted was cash, no strings attached, so she could maintain the illusion of independence while actually being completely dependent on my income. She started making passive-aggressive comments about how I was becoming selfish and ungrateful. She told relatives that I was going through a difficult phase and asked them to talk to me about my responsibilities to family. My Aunt Linda called to lecture me about honoring my mother, and my cousin Rebecca sent me a long text message about how disappointed my father would be in my behavior. These interventions from family members were particularly painful because they were based on incomplete information. Patricia had spent years carefully crafting a narrative where she was the struggling widow doing her best to survive, and I was the successful daughter who was too selfish to help her mother properly. None of them knew the actual numbers involved in my financial support, or the extent to which I had been sacrificing my own future for Patricia's present comfort. I let them talk. I nodded and agreed and promised to do better. Meanwhile, I was quietly tying up loose ends in Austin. I gave my landlord notice on my apartment, citing a job relocation but not specifying where. I started selling furniture and belongings that I didn't want to ship overseas, using Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist to get rid of everything from my couch to my kitchen appliances. The process of selling my possessions was surprisingly emotional. Each item represented a piece of the life I had built in Austin, often purchased during happier times when I thought I was building toward a future that included my family in a healthy way. My dining room table was the first major furniture purchase I had made after college, bought with my first bonus check. The bookshelf in my living room had been a graduation gift to myself when I finished my computer science degree. But there was also something liberating about letting go of these material attachments. Each sale brought me closer to my goal of starting fresh in Amsterdam with only the things that truly mattered to me. I kept my laptop, my favorite books, some photographs, and a few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my father. Everything else could be replaced or wasn't worth the cost of international shipping. I scheduled my last day at the Austin office and arranged for my work to be transitioned to colleagues. This was delicate because I couldn't reveal the real reason for my departure until the transfer was officially approved and announced. I told my manager that I was exploring new opportunities and would provide more details soon. I worked extra hours to document my current projects thoroughly, ensuring a smooth transition for whoever would take over my responsibilities. The hardest part of this preparation phase was maintaining normalcy with my family while knowing that everything was about to change dramatically. I attended Marcus's engagement party and smiled through Patricia's speech about how proud she was of her children. I participated in family group texts about holiday plans, knowing I wouldn't be there for Christmas. I listened to Patricia's endless updates about party planning while calculating exactly when I would drop my bombshell. The birthday party was scheduled for a Saturday evening in mid-December. I spent the day getting ready, choosing my outfit carefully. I wanted to look professional and put together for what I knew would be my final performance as Patricia's disappointing daughter. I arrived at the country club right on time. Patricia had done an impressive job with the decorations. The room was full of flowers, elegant lighting, and a chocolate cake that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. She was wearing a new dress and jewelry that I was fairly certain I had paid for indirectly. The party was in full swing when I got there. Patricia was holding court near the bar, regaling a group of her friends with some story that had them all laughing. She spotted me across the room and waved me over with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. For the first hour, everything was normal. I made small talk with relatives I hadn't seen in months, complimented Patricia on the party, and tried to blend into the background. I was nursing a glass of wine and chatting with my cousin Marcus when Patricia decided it was time for her show. She had been drinking steadily since I arrived, and her voice was getting louder and her gestures more dramatic. She called for everyone's attention and started giving a speech about her life, her late husband, and how proud she was of her family. She talked about Marcus's engagement and his successful career in finance. She gushed about what a wonderful son he was and how lucky she was to have him. Then she turned to me. "And of course, there's my daughter Jessica," she said, her voice carrying across the entire room. "She's been going through a difficult time lately, becoming quite selfish actually. She used to be so helpful with family responsibilities, but recently she's been shirking her duties." I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I kept my expression neutral and took a sip of my wine. Patricia wasn't done. I've tried to teach her about family loyalty and taking care of the people who raised you, but she seems to think she doesn't owe me anything. She's become quite selfish with her money, even though family should come first. My Aunt Linda nodded sympathetically. My cousin Rebecca shot me a disapproving look. Even some of Patricia's friends were giving me judgmental stares. This was exactly the kind of public humiliation Patricia lived for. But then she went too far. "The truth is," Patricia said, her voice rising, "I've come to realize that Jessica is just worthless. She thinks she's successful with her little computer job, but she has no sense of family responsibility. I owe you nothing, Jessica, because you've shown me that you're worthless as a daughter." The room fell completely silent. Even Patricia's most loyal friends looked uncomfortable with how harsh her words had been. I could see Marcus shifting nervously in the corner, and Sarah was staring at her shoes. I took another sip of my wine, smiled calmly, and stood up. "That's fine, Mom," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. "I just wanted to announce that I'm moving abroad permanently. I start my new job in Amsterdam on January 15th. I guess you'll need to find someone else to pay your bills." The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Patricia's face went through several color changes, from red to pale to red again. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. "What?" she finally managed to say. "I'm moving to Amsterdam," I repeated pleasantly. "I've accepted a position with my company's European office. I'll be leaving Austin permanently in 3 weeks." You could have heard a pin drop. Patricia looked around the room desperately, as if someone might tell her this was all a joke. When she realized I was serious, her expression changed to panic. "You can't do that," she said, her voice shaky now instead of commanding. "What about your responsibilities here? What about family?" I shrugged. "You just told a room full of people that I'm worthless and that you owe me nothing." I figured that meant I was free to make my own decisions about my life. Patricia's friends were whispering among themselves now. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they did the math. If I had been supporting Patricia financially, and I was leaving the country, what did that mean for her future? My Aunt Linda stepped forward. "Jessica, surely you don't mean this. Your mother was just upset. She didn't mean what she said." "Actually," I said, still smiling, "I think she meant every word. And she's right. I have been selfish with my money lately. I've been selfishly saving it instead of giving it all to Mom. I've been selfishly planning for my own future instead of sacrificing everything for hers." Marcus finally spoke up. "Jess, can we talk about this privately?" "There's nothing to talk about privately that can't be said here," I replied. "Mom wanted to air our family business in public, so let's air it all. For the past 2 years, I've been giving Mom $3,000 a month to cover her living expenses. I've been paying her mortgage, her car payment, her credit cards, even her grocery bills." The gasps and whispers around the room were getting louder. Patricia's face was now completely pale. "That's why I haven't bought my own house yet," I continued. "That's why I drive a 10-year-old Honda and live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Every month, I give mom more money than most people make in salary, and apparently that makes me worthless and selfish. Patricia tried to interrupt. Jessica, you're embarrassing yourself. Stop this right now. Am I embarrassing myself? I asked. Or am I finally telling the truth about our relationship? You want to know what's embarrassing, Mom? What's embarrassing is a 55-year-old woman who can't support herself and has to rely on her worthless daughter to maintain her lifestyle. The room was buzzing now. Patricia's carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time. All these people who had listened to her criticize me for years were suddenly seeing the truth about who was really supporting whom. My cousin Rebecca looked shocked. You've been giving her over $75,000? Sometimes more, I confirmed. Last month it was $3,500 because she wanted to redecorate her kitchen. The month before that it was $4,000 because her car needed work. Meanwhile, she tells everyone who will listen about how selfish and irresponsible I am. Patricia was frantically looking around the room, trying to find someone who would support her version of events. But even her closest friends looked uncomfortable. They were doing the math, realizing that the lifestyle Patricia had been maintaining wasn't possible on her secretary's salary. That's enough, Patricia said, her voice desperate now. Jessica, we need to discuss this at home, not here. We've discussed it plenty at home, I said. Every discussion ends with you telling me I need to give you more money and be more grateful for the privilege. Well, I'm done discussing it. I'm moving to Amsterdam, and you'll need to figure out how to support yourself like an adult. My Aunt Linda stepped forward again. Jessica, family takes care of family. Your mother raised you and sacrificed for you. Don't you think you owe her something? I turned to face my aunt directly. I've given her over $75,000 in the past 2 years. How much more do I owe her? How much of my life am I supposed to sacrifice? When do I get to have my own dreams and goals? Even Linda didn't have an answer for that. Patricia tried one more desperate play. You can't leave me with nothing. I'll lose the house. I'll have nowhere to go. You have a job, I pointed out. You have Marcus. You have all these friends who think I'm so terrible for not giving you enough money. Maybe one of them can step up and support you for a while. The room was completely silent again. Patricia looked around desperately, but no one met her eyes. It's easy to criticize someone else's family obligations when you're not being asked to take them on yourself. Marcus cleared his throat. Mom, maybe we should talk about this later. Let's not ruin your party. But the party was already ruined. Patricia had orchestrated this public humiliation to put me in my place, and instead, she had exposed herself as a manipulative woman who had been financially abusing her daughter for years. I finished my wine and set the glass down on the nearest table. I should go. I have a lot of packing to do. Patricia grabbed my arm as I walked past her. Jessica, please. We can work this out. I'm sorry for what I said. I was just upset. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. For the first time in years, I saw her as she really was, a scared, desperate woman who had built her entire life on manipulation and control. I almost felt sorry for her. Mom, I said quietly, you called me worthless in front of 50 people because I've been struggling to support both of us on one salary. You humiliated me to make yourself feel powerful. That's not something you said because you were upset. That's something you said because it's what you really think of me. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I hope you have a good rest of your birthday. I'll send you my new address once I'm settled in Amsterdam. I walked out of that country club with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up again as 50 people tried to process what they had just witnessed. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I had to finish up my work projects, pack my belongings, and handle all the logistics of an international move. Patricia called me dozens of times, alternating between anger, guilt trips, and desperate pleading. I stopped answering after the first few calls. Marcus reached out to me a few days after the party. He was uncomfortable and clearly conflicted about the whole situation. He asked if there was any way I could delay the move or continue sending money remotely. When I explained that I had already accepted the position and signed a lease in Amsterdam, he offered to help Patricia financially. That conversation was interesting. It turned out Marcus had known about my financial support all along, but he had convinced himself that it was my choice and that I could easily afford it. When I broke down the actual numbers for him, he was shocked to realize how much of my income had been going to our mother. He agreed to help Patricia with some of her expenses, but he made it clear that he couldn't cover everything I had been paying. Patricia would have to make some significant lifestyle changes. She would probably need to sell the house and find a smaller place. She would definitely need to give up some of her more expensive habits. Sarah, Marcus's fiancée, was actually very supportive of my decision. She told Marcus privately that she had always thought Patricia was too dependent on me financially. She had encouraged Marcus to speak up years ago, but he had been too conflict-averse to get involved. The response from our extended family was mixed. Some relatives were appalled that I was abandoning my mother. Others, particularly the ones who had dealt with Patricia's manipulation firsthand, were quietly supportive. My Uncle Tom, my father's brother, called to tell me he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. My Aunt Linda, who had been so critical at the party, called a week later to apologize. She admitted that she hadn't realized how much money I had been giving Patricia. She also confessed that Patricia had been asking relatives for money for months, claiming that I wasn't helping her enough. Now she understood why Patricia had been so desperate. The most surprising call came from Patricia's best friend, Margaret, who had been at the party. She called to tell me that she had been uncomfortable with how Patricia talked about me for years. She said Patricia constantly complained about my selfishness while simultaneously bragging about the vacations and purchases that I was funding. Margaret had suspected something was off, but she hadn't realized the extent of it until my announcement at the party. Patricia herself continued calling for about 2 weeks, but when it became clear that I wasn't going to change my mind, the calls stopped. I heard through Marcus that she had been telling people I was having some kind of mental breakdown and that I would come to my senses eventually. I left Austin on January 10th, 5 days earlier than originally planned. I wanted to give myself time to settle in Amsterdam before starting work. The company had arranged temporary housing for me, and I was excited to start this new chapter of my life. My flight was early in the morning, and I didn't tell anyone except Marcus when I was leaving. I didn't want any dramatic airport scenes or last-minute guilt trips. I just wanted to leave quietly and start fresh. As my plane lifted off from Austin Bergstrom International Airport, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders that I had been carrying for years. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free to make decisions based on what I wanted, not what Patricia needed from me. Amsterdam is incredible. My apartment is small but beautiful, with large windows overlooking a canal. My colleagues are friendly and welcoming, and the work is challenging and rewarding. I'm learning Dutch, exploring the city on weekends, and slowly building a social life. I've been here for 2 months now, and I can honestly say I'm happier than I've been in years. I have money in my savings account for the first time since college. I bought a bike, which is apparently mandatory for living in Amsterdam. I've joined a local hiking group and taken weekend trips to Belgium and Germany. The best part is the peace. No constant phone calls asking for money. No guilt trips about family obligations. No one telling me that my accomplishments aren't good enough or that I'm selfish for wanting my own life. I've heard through Marcus that Patricia had to sell the house, as expected. She's moved into a smaller apartment and picked up some freelance bookkeeping work to supplement her secretary's salary. Marcus is helping her with about $500 a month, which is all he can afford with his wedding expenses. Patricia is apparently still telling people that I abandoned the family and that I'll regret this decision. She's painted herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter who chose money over family. Some people buy this narrative, but others remember the party and know better. I don't regret my decision for a second. If anything, I regret not making it sooner. I wasted 2 years of my life and tens of thousands of dollars trying to earn the approval of someone who was never going to give it to me. Patricia didn't see me as a daughter, she saw me as a resource to be exploited. The funny thing is, I probably would have been willing to help her financially in a reasonable way if she had treated me with respect. If she had acknowledged my sacrifice, shown genuine gratitude, and worked toward becoming more independent, I would have been happy to assist during her transition period after Dad's death. Instead, she treated my support as an entitlement and me as a personal ATM. She made it clear that no amount of money would ever be enough and that I would never be anything more than a disappointment in her eyes. So I gave her exactly what she said she wanted, nothing. I've made new friends here who can't believe the story when I tell them about my relationship with Patricia. They're shocked that a mother would speak to her daughter the way Patricia spoke to me, especially in public. It's been validating to have people who barely know me recognize that her behavior was inappropriate. One of my new colleagues, Emma, put it perfectly: your mother trained you to believe that your only value was in what you could give her financially. When you stopped giving, she tried to convince you that you had no value at all. But you do have value, just for being you. That conversation made me realize how deep Patricia's manipulation had gone. She had convinced me that my worth as a person was tied to my willingness to sacrifice for her. When I started prioritizing my own needs, she labeled me as selfish and worthless. It was a classic manipulation tactic, and it had worked on me for years. I'm in therapy now, working through some of the damage from growing up with Patricia. It's helping me understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish, that saying no doesn't make me a bad person, and that I deserve to have my own dreams and goals. My therapist asked me what I want people to take away from my story, and I thought about it a lot. I think the main lesson is that family relationships have to be mutual to be healthy. If you're the only one sacrificing, if you're the only one giving, if you're the only one compromising, then you're not in a family relationship. You're in an exploitative situation. It's also important to recognize that some people will never be satisfied, no matter how much you give them. Patricia could have lived like a queen on the money I was giving her, but she always wanted more. There was no amount that would have been enough because the money wasn't really what she wanted. What she wanted was control, and complete financial dependence was how she maintained that control. Standing up to Patricia at her birthday party was terrifying, but it was also liberating. I had spent years being afraid of her disapproval, her anger, her threats to cut me off from the family. But when I finally experienced all of those things, I realized they couldn't actually hurt me. Her opinion of me only had power because I gave it power. I know some people will read this story and think I was too harsh, that I should have handled things privately, that I shouldn't have embarrassed her in front of her friends. But Patricia chose to make our conflict public. She thought she could shame me into compliance by humiliating me in front of 50 people. Instead, she exposed herself. I'm not proud of how things ended, but I'm proud of finally standing up for myself. I'm proud of choosing my own life over her expectations. I'm proud of building something new in a place where no one knows my history or has preconceived notions about what I owe to whom. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you have a Patricia in your life who is draining you financially and emotionally, I want you to know that you have options. It might seem impossible to break free, but it's not. You deserve to have your own life, your own dreams, your own future. You are not an ATM. You are not responsible for funding someone else's lifestyle at the expense of your own. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if that someone is family. It's been 2 months since the party, and Patricia still hasn't acknowledged any wrongdoing. She hasn't apologized for calling me worthless. She hasn't recognized the sacrifice I made for 2 years. She hasn't taken any responsibility for her financial situation or made any effort to become more independent. That tells me everything I need to know about whether I made the right decision. A person who genuinely cared about me would have been horrified by how she treated me at that party. A person who genuinely loved me would have been grateful for the support I provided, not resentful that it wasn't more. Patricia showed me exactly who she is, and I finally listened. Now I'm 3,000 miles away, living my best life, and she's learning to live within her means for the first time in years. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim anymore. To anyone who made it through this entire story, thank you for reading. It felt good to get it all out there. I'm off to explore more of Amsterdam this weekend. Life is good when you're finally living it for yourself.